Always great when I can be on with Ryno, and we are ready to roll here. 8 o'clock Pacific, NBA free agency. A lot of Kings fans still holding their breath, hoping that some news will emanate as it pertains to the Kings and the free agent or trade market. And as of right now, it has been quiet, Ryno.
Yes, it has, Grant, other than the typical names that have been thrown around, but not unexpectedly quiet. And quiet doesn't mean they're not working behind the scenes, Napes.
Thank you. I've been telling the fans the same thing. Quiet doesn't mean that they're not doing anything. It takes two teams to tango, and I think the big news from the Kings will come via trade more so than free agency during the what resources they have to work with. So, you know, I get the fact that fans are impatient, but the reality is it's July 2nd, not October 2nd.
Yeah, they weren't in a big chase to sign a free agent. That was
Right.
not a likely move for them, but there's
No.
other teams that were. And
Yeah.
depending on what they got, what they didn't get, that can affect what becomes available after free agency slows down.
Yeah, I've done a couple of rants on this. I'm really surprised at some of the money that's been paid out. I can't believe that Paul George got a $212 million 4-year deal. That blows me away. I can't believe James Harden got a $70 million 2-year deal. That blows me away. Quite frankly, I was surprised that Klay Thompson got a 3-year deal at $50 million. I just think there were too many times last year when he looked like he couldn't play anymore. And that's quite an investment on the Dallas Mavericks, but good for the players. The money is out there. As far as Sacramento goes, I think it's pretty obvious that they have to get a little ballsy and make a move. I don't look at Oklahoma City. Look how much better. I think Oklahoma
Tremendous.
City right now, without even knowing what any other teams are going to do in the West, is the team to beat next year, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm with you, Napes. You bring in Hartenstein. Are you kidding me? Like they needed another piece and just another team that shows. Grant, they're a team that's ready to go all in.
Yes.
The Knicks, a team that's ready to
Yep.
go all in. The
Yep.
Kings, Napes, not so much, especially
Right.
the names we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's frustrating for Sacramento fans because I think on the heels of last year, the 48-win third seed, fans were looking to really build on that, and they didn't really fall off that much. They only, they lost 2 fewer games, but the West was considerably tougher, and so it looked worse. But really, the difference in from Mike Brown's first year to his second year was a net 2-game loss.
And if you, by watching the product on the court year by year, you would have thought it would have been much more than a net 2-game loss at
Yep.
times. So I think there is a quiet confidence about that group. People that I have talked to, I've mentioned free throws being a point of emphasis, not just making them, but getting there. But also, I think that guys know there was more they could have done. There was things left on the court, and there's room
Yep.
for improvement, whether it's on the court, the coaching staff, all the way across the board.
A team that I think has gotten weaker this offseason is Denver. I
Yes.
mean, I still think they're, as long as they have Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, they're really, really good. But now all of a sudden, they've lost a couple of key pieces in back-to-back years.
Yeah, they're one of those teams that were greatly affected by the aprons, Grant, and
Yes.
that is one of the niches with the new CBA. It's trying to spread the wealth out a little bit more, but losing KCP, especially having that option off the bench to really
Yes.
explode on the nights where Murray's struggling or Jokic is in foul trouble, that's a big loss and a huge pickup for Orlando.
A very, very big pickup for Orlando. I'm looking at the Clippers, who lose Paul George, but they're adding a lot of pieces, and I don't know how it's all going to fit together, but they're going to be a vastly different looking team next year.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of it. And I know some of the pieces they've added, there's some questions behind them, but they're opening a new building. So when I
Yes.
look at the players they've brought in, and then you worry about Kawhi Leonard, his ability to stay on the court, you don't know. We didn't expect a ton out of the Clippers last year, Grant, and all of a sudden out of the gate, they looked like a real contender.
Yeah. All right. If you want to get in on the program, the link is in the chat box, and you have the QR code above our shoulder. Also, if you weren't with me earlier at 5 o'clock or yesterday, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to start a new segment on my show where you pick out a rant every day for me. All right. And I need a name. We've gotten a couple of names. It's got to be not very wordy so I can make a graphic. I'm going to look to have a sponsor as well. but you will decide what my rant of the day will be. You'll give me rant ideas. I'll pick one out and then I'll do a rant. But we need a name for it. All right. John said, John had a good, one today said a rant for Grant. But I want a name. So think of some names that I can use for the segment. And in a couple weeks, I'll start it. I'm not going to start it probably this month, but maybe right at the beginning of football season when we start getting crazy, I'll start that segment where you pick out a rant for me. I'll do my rant, and we got to have a little catchy name for it. Okay.
That's going to be fun. I love the creative process. I'll have to think of some names. Like right off the top of my head, your rant, same Grant, something along those lines. I mean,
Yeah.
we could figure something out. Good job by John, though.
A rant for Grant. I mean, there's all kinds of things. You know what? Well, it can't be too wordy because I want to have a graphic made, and I'd like to be able to sell it, have a sponsor, and make it a daily thing.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Like Grant said, too, we want to hear from you. Get involved in the chat. Make sure you give us a thumbs up, and you can call on the phone lines, much like Jay. Welcome in tonight.
What's going on? You guys like the name, Jay Wojnarowski?
Hey, I do see that. How about that?
Yeah.
Hello,
Well
Woj.
done.
What's
What
up?
up, Woj?
What's going on? Sacramento's very own Wojnarowski. So
I like it. Hey, good for you. That means that I want you to be first with all the information. That's a lot of pressure for you.
I'm trying. I'm sure it's a lot of pressure for the real guys. So,
Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah, I heard you guys talking about, well, whatever you guys were just talking about, pretty much a lot of everything. You guys touched on a lot of stuff today. So I think me and Ryno in particularly spoke about the Philadelphia 76ers and more so how he believes that they need to be proven with that new Paul George signing. And I don't think that we see like eye to eye. Like he knows where I stand with Joel Embiid is him. So we call him Joel Embiid, right? He's that guy. And how I think he is the best big man in the league. And I would love to get your take on that, Grant. What do you think about this?
I think Nikola Jokic is the best big man in the league, and I think that his playoffs have proven that. And Embiid, to me, just misses too many in games. I think that if Embiid were healthy, which he has not been, then I would say yes. But the difference between Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid is I can count on Jokic every day to go up and be at work. I can't count on Embiid, and I never know when Embiid's going to be available and not. And for that reason alone, I would take Jokic.
I think I threw some bait in the water and you bit, because me and Ryno also touched on it too. And he said that was one of his main points with Joel, with his injury history, and Paul George, which is also funny how you brought up Paul George getting $212 per 4 years or whatever it is. And
hey, can I just say something? Did anyone hear me say that I think Nikola Jokic is the best big man ever? Are you listening out there? What the hell do you people do when you watch the show? Like, do you make up stuff? Like, seriously, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with people?
Grant's
do you
new
just make
show.
up stuff? It's unbelievable to me.
Grant's new show already. You get
It's unbelievable to me. It really is.
Take the bait with Napes.
By the way, I do like Jason's comment a couple of moments ago about the name of my segment. All right, I got to tell you,
I saw that.
Here we go. All rants matter. I like that. All rants matter. That could be the leader in the clubhouse right now. But go ahead, Jay. I didn't mean to step on you, buddy.
No. That was great. That was a great take right there. We love the rants by Grant. Speaking of, back to the Paul George and everything. Speaking of the Clippers earlier, which you guys mentioned, you guys got to make sure you check out Clipped, the new Hulu TV show. Well, I forgot the guy's name. Not Steve Ballmer, not the current owner of the Clippers, but the whole scandal with Donald Sterling. And have you seen the show Modern Family?
No.
Yes.
Do you know Ryno? Do you know the grandfather who dated Sofia Vergara?
Yeah. I can't think
Donald
of his name.
Sterling.
Okay, so Al Bundy, Grant from Mary.
Okay.
Yes.
He plays Donald Sterling. He does a phenomenal job. It's a series, not a docu-series. It's a reenactment. So they're actors. And it goes into depth on that. But you guys should check it out. It's called Clipped. New
Okay.
episode drops tonight. But back to the Paul George and everything. First of all, I could go on a rant about the Clippers. It's the worst organization in the league. Never won a championship. Terrible. That's my quick rant on the Clippers. Back to Paul George and the 76ers. So you bit the bait, Grant. You bit it. You said he's not healthy. And I said, when you're competing for a championship like the 76ers, and I 110, Ed O'Neal, that guy, I 110% agree with you that their injury history, Paul George and Embiid's, hasn't been the most clear-cut, healthiest players. I understand that. But when you're competing for a championship, you can't bank on them getting injured. You have to be willing to take that risk because that injury can happen to Nikola Jokic. It could happen to LeBron. It's never happened to LeBron, but he could tear his ACL next season. It could happen to anybody. So
Of
you
course.
can't just.
But history matters. History matters. When you look at Embiid every single year, there's no reason to look at his career and think that, well, this year it's just going to be fine and he's going to play in 70, 75, 80 games. I mean, there's nothing in his history that would give me confidence that that would occur. And here's the other thing that a lot of fans do not understand. It's not about playing in 60 or 70 games. It's about playing in the playoff games, okay? The reason why the New Orleans Pelicans did not win a game in the playoffs this year was because they didn't have Zion Williamson. Doesn't really matter what Zion Williamson did during the regular season. Doesn't really matter how many games he played. Same with Joel Embiid. The reason why the Sixers did not advance in the playoffs this year is because Embiid was not anywhere near 100%, and there were games that he didn't play. So it's really not how many games you play in the regular season, which I'm not minimizing that. But when you get ready for your off-season training, and I've talked to a lot of players about this, and the fans don't quite get this. You don't program yourself to play in 82 games during the regular season. You really need to program your body to play in 100 games or 105 games or whatever it is, because your mentality should be, I'm going to play until June, not the middle of April. And so it's not about training your body to play in, let's say, 80 games during the regular season. You need to train your body to play in at least 100 games because that's the goal. It doesn't do any good if you're Zion Williamson and you played in more regular season games this year than you have at any time in your career. But, oh, boy, when the playoffs start, you're not available because you hurt your hamstring. That doesn't do anybody any good.
And to your point, really quick, Grant, injuries add up too. And injuries can affect the way you train that next off season. So that all plays into it. I just wanted to throw that in. Go ahead, Jay.
Well, that brings me, I guess, naturally to ask the question, and it's been spoken about and whispered about for a while now. Do you think that the NBA season should be shortened to help prevent some of this?
No, because we never had a problem in the past. It's like pitchers in baseball and what John Smoltz is preaching. We never had a problem with pitchers going complete games and throwing 125 pitches. But, you know, the analytics has ruined the aspect of pitching in Major League Baseball. It's the same way that we're seeing in other professional sports. Why is it that the Michael Jordans and the Kobe Bryants of the world and the Karl Malones and the John Stocktons, and I can go on and on and on, had no problem playing every game and playing every playoff game? Now, all of a sudden, we got to shorten the season. No, we don't have to shorten the season. We have to change the way we think about our athletes.
That's very true. It's a lot of wear and tear, you know, regardless. So it's tough to see like players like Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis not show up when it matters in the off season. I totally get where you're coming from, though. It's just I want to see every team.
Why is it that we have more Tommy John surgeries going on in Major League Baseball now than ever before, and yet our pitchers are programmed where they don't pitch after the fifth inning, where it was a generation ago where pitching a complete game, whether if you were Oral Hershiser or even after him, and I can name other great pitchers, were expected when they started the game to go 8 innings and hand the ball to your closer in the ninth, Tug McGraw, Sparky Lyle, Rich Gossage. I can go on and on, Bruce Sutter. Okay, I can go on and on. Or complete the game. Whereas now our starters, like I saw the rookie pitcher of the Dodgers the other night pitch a complete game. I forgot his name off the top of my head. And the announcers, were Davis and Hershiser were applauding it in the day and age of we don't see pitchers pitch complete games anymore. And they were raving about that. And it's a shame because when Oral pitched, you were expected to pitch 9 innings and they weren't counting how many pitches you were throwing. And Oral didn't have Tommy John surgery. And the pitchers back then, you know why? Because they pitched. They didn't just throw as hard as they could. They were pitchers. If Tommy John, who the surgery was famously named after, was coming out of high school right now, scouts wouldn't even look at him because he threw junk. Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux, all of these pitchers that pitched, right? They wouldn't even be looked at. And it's a shame because they were Hall of Fame pitchers.
You know what, Grant? Jason beat me to the punch here, but I think there is one thing that we can at least put forth to that argument. How many sports did you play growing up, Grant? How many sports?
Well, I played high school football, high school lacrosse, and college lacrosse, but I also played hockey as a kid growing up. I played basketball until I got to high school, and then I stopped playing because I concentrated on just lacrosse and football. But I played tennis and I played golf. But go ahead.
Bingo. Jay, how about you?
I played football and baseball like for a season or two, but
And I know where you're going with this. Now you're pressured to only choose one sport.
Choose a sport. It's not so much choose a sport. Even when you get within a sport, you specialize many times in one area of that sport.
Exactly. That's funny. Yeah. Because
it's a big problem in our society. Huge 100%. Problem.
Yeah. I played competitive basketball since like 4 or 5 years old in different leagues and stuff. But I tried to branch out, like you said, to football, to baseball, but I always navigated my way throughout high school years.
The Deion Sanders and the Bo Jacksons of the world are a thing of the past, right?
Agreed. Totally.
Danny Ainge, a thing of the past. I share this story, and I was sitting at a dinner table at a birthday party with Roger Staubach and his wife one night, and I started talking to Roger, who, by the way, was one of the most fascinating, nicest people I've ever met in my life. And we were talking about his career. And he told me, he goes, I didn't even start playing football until high school. I said, what? He goes, yeah, I was a baseball player. He goes, and I played baseball at the Naval Academy. Because I asked him, was it a thrill for him as a football player to play at the old Yankee Stadium? Because I explained to him that I used to love watching him and Bob Hayes and Calvin Hill when I was a kid at once a year when they came in to play at Yankee Stadium. He goes, that was my favorite place to play by far. And I go, really? He said, yeah, because my dream as a kid was always to be a Major League Baseball player and play in Yankee Stadium. And he said, I actually was a baseball player. And he said, that was my first love. And he said, I didn't start playing football until high school. And then I played both baseball and football at the Naval Academy. And I found that to be fascinating because that would never happen in this day and age.
Never.
Jay, you know who Roger Staubach was?
I don't.
Whoa.
Okay, one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play in the National Football League. One of the most famous Dallas Cowboys ever, and multiple Super Bowls, and to this day is an iconic member of the Dallas community and the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay.
Go look him up. Go look him up when you got a chance. Number 12 of the Dallas Cowboys. Go look at some highlights of him. He was one of the great quarterbacks in the history of the National Football League.
When comparing like the older generation of quarterbacks, is there any like traits that you see from watching older generation quarterbacks that should still be in practice with the modern day quarterback? Or do you feel like the modern day quarterback evolving, so call it, by adapting to newer play calling and stuff like that? Do you feel like the biggest difference
between then and now, and Roger Staubach's kind of an exception to the rule because he had tremendous mobility, is teams now are looking for multi-dimensional quarterbacks that can throw and run. Back in the era that we're talking about, most quarterbacks were strictly drop back quarterbacks. And I still think that's the way to go. If I were running an NFL team, that's the quarterback I would want. I
So
want a
pocket
Tom Brady.
passer.
I want a Peyton Manning. I want a quarterback that plays within the pocket. And I think that's your best success, because I think that quarterbacks that run in the National Football League are quarterbacks that get hurt too frequently. And I can't win if my quarterback
Is hurt.
is not on the field.
Same thing with like the Joel Embiid and that's what injury is it really does suck, because you see all these rosters changing and all these teams sound so good at the beginning of the season. You expect them to make it to playoffs or whatever, and injury happens, and look what happens. Philadelphia was looking good last season in the beginning, and I think
You don't even
six.
Sorry to step on you. You don't even get out of training camp the first week of training camp without hearing about an ACL,
That
without
is
hearing
hilarious.
about,
That's so true. Yeah.
It's one of those things. And to your point, Grant, quarterbacks back then could take a hit. And I'm not blaming the quarterbacks now. They're so protected. But anytime a quarterback gets hit these days, it's like, back then they were tough as nails.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we have to, you have to, things change, times change, right? Steve Young would say differently, Grant. No, I don't think Steve Young would say differently. Maybe I'm wrong. And by the way, Steve Young, we talk about him. Steve Young only had one good postseason in his entire career, and it was a great postseason. Not good, it was great. But that's it. If you look at Steve Young's career, that was it. Only one good postseason. He was terrible in the other postseasons, and all you got to do is take the 1 year that he won the Super Bowl, which he was great, and remove that, and his postseason stats look awful. Troy Aikman owned the Niners and Steve Young during that era. Owned them, okay? So, I've always thought Steve Young, in my opinion, was an overrated quarterback, and I watched him play every game of his career. Steve Young did not read defenses very well. Steve Young threw the ball up for grabs all too often. Steve Young was a great, with a capital G, great athlete. Great. But if you go back and watch all of Steve Young's games, particularly in the playoffs, even the game that was a very famous ending in the playoffs against Green Bay, where he threw the game winner to Owens, the play right before that, it was typical Steve Young. He threw the ball in the double coverage, and the Packers defender literally just dropped the ball. What should have been a clear interception to end the game. So I look at the quarterback position differently. I want the most important. People always say he's got a great arm. Do you know what a bunch of nonsense that is? Do you know that every single quarterback that comes into the National Football League has a great arm? Now, are some arms better than other? Yeah, but you know what? They say Jeff George, and I don't know if you know who Jeff George was, had a great arm, and he did. But Jeff George was not a good quarterback because he couldn't read defenses and made too many mistakes. Give me all the quarterbacks that come into the NFL have great arms. The difference between a quarterback that makes it and doesn't is a quarterback that can read defenses. It's a quarterback that doesn't make the mistake at the most inopportune time. Those are the quarterbacks that succeed in the National Football League.
Yeah, but Grant, those are also the quarterbacks that get called game managers, whether you think that's a disrespectful term or not.
I don't think it's a disrespectful term.
Do I.
I think that the most important aspect of playing football in the National Football League is between the ears.
So do you think Brock Purdy is worth Brock Purdy, or do you think that Brock Purdy is really that talented, or do you think it's because he had so much talent around him? Which perspective?
I think he's very talented, and I think also that he's got a lot of very good talent around him. But I think that he has proven in enough games, particularly in big games, that he has what it takes to win.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's pretty good. The Brandon Ayuk situation. Have you heard about that and what's going on with that?
Yes. And I think Ayuk will be on the field for the 49ers in week 1.
Okay. Ryno?
Yeah, I'm with Grant. I don't see any way that you can't have him out there week 1.
Okay. Maybe not necessarily if he plays or not. Do you think it's right? Okay, from my perspective, I don't think it's right. He's been making less, he's slotted to make about $14 million this season. He's made about half of that, I think.
Is he under contract for this season?
Yeah, it's a team option. They're trying to pay him 14 million this year, but
Okay, did he sign the contract or did someone else sign his name on the contract?
Grant,
Ooh,
I know
good
where you're going with this,
question.
but we could say the same about Chris Paul, but they still
Well,
waived him
I
because you're overpaying his
I,
value, and
I
you're now
understand.
Ayuk is getting underpaid his value.
I understand, but again, at some point, why do we have contracts in professional sports if people aren't going to honor them?
That's a very validated statement, and I understand that
And we
100%
also have a hard cap in the
in the
NFL, which we
NFL.
don't have in the NBA, correct?
Yeah, that is very true. But you see,
And the biggest problem, and the Niners are going to find themselves in this problem,
oh
in
yeah,
this situation when Brock Purdy is due to get. The problem in the NFL is that teams overpay for the quarterbacks. That's the
Yeah.
biggest problem in
oh
the NFL.
Lord, yeah, that's
And
yeah.
and the problem with that is if you're a team like the Cowboys and you overpay for a quarterback that is good, but nothing more than good, in my opinion, or other teams like the Giants who overpaid for Daniel Jones, it gives you less money to pay for other players, such as Saquon Barkley, and now he's not on the Giants, he's on Philadelphia. And why a lot of the running backs now are changing teams frequently
Mhm.
because teams are not willing, because they don't have the money left over to pay what they think is a less, well, how do I want to say this? It's not as an important position as it used to
Mhm.
be because of how the game has evolved now into a passing league as opposed to a running league.
Well, circling back to what you said earlier with injuries, that being a running back is a high contact position. Each
Yes.
time you get the ball, there's a 99% chance that you're going to get touched. Yes,
Well,
you could take it to the end zone, but most of the time you touch that ball throughout the whole season, you're getting tackled, which puts you at a higher risk of injury.
yeah, you know who was also responsible for picking up the hot guy on a blitz? A running back.
That's right. Yep.
Oh,
So,
yes, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And there's, so a running back has probably more heavy contact or hard contact than any position on the field.
But that's the reason why they don't want to. The running back market has been so lower
Right.
compared to these other positions because that risk of injury. You don't want to tie up
Right.
$35 million per season for Christian McCaffrey, which he's phenomenal. I tell
He
my
is
girlfriend, I
phenomenal.
say that white boy can run when we're watching him. He's phenomenal, but he's making like 15 million.
Don't say white boy. Just call him a player.
I didn't
And I
mean
hope
it
you
in
don't mind
any
me
type
saying
of
that. I don't
derogatory
like
way.
that. I got to tell you, it bothers me when I go with people of all makes of life. It bothers me to hear that description, just like it bothers me when we talk about a black player in the National Hockey League, which there aren't a
Oh,
lot
I
of
see.
them. I want to get to a point in our society where we stop judging athletes who play a position that is dominated by a person of another race, such as running backs. There aren't a lot of Caucasian running backs, most are, but like it's the same thing in track and field. If you turn on the Olympics, right, Jay? Let's just be honest here,
Or
right?
like
And we watch
swimming
we
or
watch the 100-yard
yeah.
dash. If we see a person who is white, people always talk about that. Like, yeah, maybe it's an anomaly based on that position, but
Yeah,
you
and
know
I
what I'm
didn't
saying?
mean that
It
in
just
any discriminatory
no, I
or
know that. I know you didn't. I know you didn't. But
yeah.
I'm just like,
No, and I totally get because whether it's a joke or not, it still feeds
Caitlin
into
Clark.
that.
Is there a better example in our society today than Caitlin Clark
That's
of
a
what I'm
great
talking
example.
about?
That's a great
Right.
example.
And so, like, then because of that, like now we have a big controversy, Jay and Ryan, in the WNBA. Is Caitlin Clark getting the endorsements, and is the ratings in the WNBA only increasing because of her skin color? And my retort to that is this, okay? There are black athletes in our society that would disprove that. And I'll go to tennis and talk about Serena Williams, who, in my opinion, is the greatest women's tennis player ever. Okay. And she's black.
Tiger
And
Woods.
people flocked to go watch her play. People flocked to their TVs to go watch her play. People gave her standing ovations wherever she played. People idolized her, and she wasn't white. And we can say the same thing about Kobe and Michael and LeBron, and we can say the same thing about the highest paid quarterbacks now in the National Football League until just this year. I think 7 of the top 8 quarterbacks, the highest paid players in the National Football League, were all people of color. They weren't white. You know what I mean? Like, so I think I'm hoping, and again, I'm really hoping this. I'm hoping that we are evolving to a point where we stop judging that, but we're not, because look at Caitlin Clark, Jay and Ryan. Look at what has happened with Caitlin Clark and the other players in the WNBA, such as Angel Reese, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Who are now complaining, what about me?
Oh yeah,
and they're making it into a racial thing. And my contention is, if Caitlin Clark were black, there would still be as much fanfare around her
Yes.
as there is now. And I believe the reason why Caitlin Clark is on this stage is because of Angel Reese and what happened a year ago in the Final Four with Reese's antics towards Clark. What it did is it brought all of the attention to Clark and Reese, who, by the way, are both great, great basketball players, okay? And a lot of casual observers were then brought into this situation, started following it. And I do believe that because of that particular situation, Clark's status or popularity increased, more eyes gathered on her, and she was great this past year in the women's game. And I think it just transcends into professional basketball and the WNBA.
Taylor Swift, Kanye West. You can even go pop culture there to a degree. But yeah, it's too bad that there's more separators, and to a point that the media drives that conversation too. You know, it should be
Of course
something.
they do. Stephen A. Smith is the number one, and I'm going to use the word culprit of this. See, like, Jay, you and I walk in different shoes, okay? And you can't walk in my shoes, and I'll never be able to walk in yours. And I accept that, and I respect that. And I hate to go off on this cycle here because I'm getting off on a tangent, but I want to make this point. I think that, and you didn't do this, so I'm not. This has nothing to do with your comment. I think the biggest problem in our society today is too often there are people that bring race and the race card into a situation where race has nothing to do with it, and then a mountain comes from a molehill. And I think that today is the biggest problem in our society. I really do.
Napes, it was a problem before social media and misinformation, but a simple statement that can be a simple statement by the time it gets typed out into 140 characters like a game of telephone, it changes. And before you know it, it's on fire and there's nothing you can do about it. It's scary.
You know, like when a black coach gets fired in the NBA, Stephen A. Smith and everyone wants to talk about, gee, that would have never happened to a white coach, but that's not true. Yeah. When you see a JJ Redick get hired and Stephen A. Smith, or wants to quickly talk about that would have never happened to a black coach. Well, that's wrong. There are plenty of examples of black coaches going right from no coaching experience onto the sidelines and coaching an NBA team. So, like, you can't have it both ways. And listen, do I believe that race is an important subject? Yes. Do I think that there are problems in our country? Yes, I do. But I don't think that everything is just black and white all the time, and that when something unfortunate happens to a black person, that it's necessarily because of race. And yet people just keep on throwing that and having it stick against the wall, hopefully. And I just think it's unfortunate. Not everything that happens to either a black person or a white person is because of the color of their skin. Things happen. It's just part of life. And again, people are talking about Monty Williams. Well, Monty Williams got fired by the Detroit Pistons after 1 year, but he went to Phoenix and brought the team into the NBA Finals and was rewarded with a $65 million contract. And guess what? The coach that replaced Monty Williams in Detroit is also black. J.B. Bickerstaff. So for every J.J. Redick that there is, well, Doc Rivers did the same thing when he was coaching, when he got his first job in Orlando.
That's
okay,
right.
and Jason Kidd, okay, got a job in Dallas, and I can in New Jersey. I can go on and on with this.
Yep.
You know, Stephen A. Smith made such a big deal when Steve Nash got the Nets job. I mean, talking about that would never happen with a young black coach. Well, he's wrong. It has happened on several occasions with young black coaches. So again, you just can't automatically go to the race card all the time. And I'm 65 and I'll never see it in my lifetime. I'm hoping that you guys who are younger do see it. I hope that we can get to a point in our society where we stop looking at everything in black and white. I really do.
Amen.
Well, looking at like organizations like the NFL, when it comes to a race standpoint, it's alleged that the NFL is more racist in quotations than the NBA. But I mean, look at Mike Tomlin has had terrible seasons with the Steelers and he's still a coach. You know, that has nothing to do with race. And Antonio Pierce took a Caucasian coach's position in the middle of the season a season ago. So
that's correct.
And this is a league that's supposed to be more white dominated than the NBA.
Well, and then you have Eric Bieniemy, right? He can't get a head coaching job, and it comes down to, in some media members' opinion, race. How about maybe the guy just doesn't interview well? How about maybe he's not the right
people that I've heard that from many people that are on the inside of organizations that I know that have told me he just does not impress in a room with his interview characteristics. All right, it's just it is what it is. Some people do, but listen, the NFL's track record is suspect, and they where Jay, there's more to it in the NFL because of their track record. I always look at track records of an
from
an individual.
From a racial standpoint
of the lack of minority coaches.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And I think that you can't ignore the disparity there. And I believe that it is worth exploring and worth talking about. I do think that, and I may be wrong here, but I hope that we're past this. But then we weren't, because of what happened in the Super Bowl a few years ago when a reporter asked Patrick Mahomes about, two black quarterbacks playing head to head in the Super Bowl or whatever the case was. And are we not past that? Are we not? Are we not past that with our NFL quarterbacks? Our highest paid players in the National Football League are at the quarterback position, many of whom are black. So, can we stop talking about we judge our black quarterbacks differently and they're scrutinized differently? And no, they're paid. Deshaun Watson is a great example of that. He became the highest paid player in the NFL with a guaranteed $250 million contract, who has, let's just call it the way it is, the most controversial, egregious acts off the field of any quarterback in the NFL. Can I make that comment? Can I make a blanket comment?
Yesterday, I never heard it before, but someone called him Deshaun Crosby yesterday, like Bill Cosby. But, he said Google the picture and they photoshopped Bill Cosby in a Deshaun Watson uniform.
And I laughed, but I really shouldn't laugh because the allegations were very serious, and
Terrible.
Yet, and so we see what transpires with him, and yet there are still those in the media that think we judge our black quarterbacks differently than our white quarterbacks. And I'm sorry, I don't see that. I just, maybe I'm walking with blinders on. I try to take blinders off and I try to look at this and listen to both sides of the story here. But maybe that was an issue 20 years ago, but it's not an issue now. We have many starting quarterbacks in the NFL who are black. They're all paid much higher in many instances than their white counterparts. And yet there are the Stephen A. Smiths of the world that still think we judge them and scrutinize them, and that there's racism involved with how we evaluate our black quarterbacks. And I don't see that. I think it's absurd.
Yeah, it's crazy how far the NFL came, especially with that. Like you said, NFL quarterbacks are the top paid, the top of the top right now are of a minority color. Not that they are like minorities or less than somebody, but of diverse color. Let's say that's a better word.
Yeah, yeah. And again,
So,
I'm not Mr.
and
like
even
know-it-all.
Tua Tagovailoa, I can't even say his last name. Tua Tagovailoa though, like
Yeah.
that's a diverse. It's not just there's black quarterbacks now. There's
Samoan. There, yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
I just like to look at the quarterbacks as people. And, I like to look at, and here's the other aspect of this that I've always said. Do we really think that there's a general manager in the National Football League that wouldn't take a black quarterback if he thought that black quarterback could get him to a Super Bowl? I mean, can we stop it? The reality is there's not a general manager in the NFL that would say no to a black quarterback if they felt that that quarterback could win a Super Bowl. There's not one. It's all about winning, because when general managers win, guess what? They keep their job and they get new contracts and they make a lot of money and their career is solidified.
Yeah.
So I've never understood that premise that, gee, certain teams don't want black quarterbacks.
Well,
Why?
Could it not necessarily be the general manager, but could it be the owner? Like, is there an owner of the NFL? Not necessarily the general manager, but you know what I mean? Like,
Well, I'll put the owner in the same
category.
light. Yes. Why would an owner not want to win a Super Bowl with a black quarterback? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And again, I don't know all 32 owners in the NFL.
I don't either.
But can you imagine an owner, and again, help me out here if I'm wrong. Could you imagine an owner telling their general manager, no, don't draft him because he's black? Well, he can win us a Super Bowl. No, I don't want to win a Super Bowl. Like, does that really go on? I don't think
laughed
so.
because I brought up the Donald Sterling stuff earlier.
I was thinking that this is coming full circle. Yeah.
Full circle to the. That's why I asked you, because
but Donald Sterling was the only owner. And I said this on my radio show and people thought it was a racist comment and I was supporting Donald Sterling. No, I didn't support Donald Sterling. And by the way, for the record, nobody called up that day and had any issue with what I said. Nobody from our radio station said, gee, you kind of crossed the line there. Nobody said a word. You know why? Because I didn't say anything inflammatory. Do you know that before Donald Sterling lost his job, okay, he was the only owner in the NBA, the only one of all 30, in an era where there were many complaints about we don't have enough black executives and we don't have enough black head coaches. He was the only owner in the NBA that had a black general manager in Elgin Baylor and a black head coach in Doc Rivers. No other owner.
Speaking of Doc Rivers, Lawrence Fishburne.
Think about that for a minute. In an era where there was a huge emphasis on hiring more minorities in the front office and on the bench, he was the only owner in the NBA that had black general manager and a black head coach.
Yeah, you gotta watch clips for sure. You have to, because they show Elgin Baylor, and I was saying Lawrence Fishburne plays Doc Rivers, and he sounds and looks just like him actually in the show. But besides that, it's more so not necessarily that he was deliberately racist, or like you said, he was
a horrible owner, awful owner.
Yeah, that's where it comes, because the way he would talk to them,
the worst. He was horrible. No one liked Donald Sterling. Donald Sterling was a horrible owner, and everyone in LA knew that, and there was nothing that anyone can do about it until he was caught on video using the N-word, and that was it. And you know what? That was a great day for the NBA, because the NBA never wanted Donald Sterling in the league anyway.
Yeah.
They didn't think twice about that one. Adam Silver was pretty swift when he came down with that decision.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't have a choice.
He did not know,
because the players said they weren't going to go on the court and play, and the sponsors said they weren't going to sponsor the team anymore. So it was a very easy decision for Adam Silver to make.
Yeah, they
and the right
forced the sale of
it was the right decision. I mean, first of all, Donald Sterling was a bad owner. His track record proves it. I mean, you want to talk about John Fisher of the A's. I mean, nobody went to the Clipper games. Nobody wanted to play for the Clippers. I mean, it's very well documented. But again, I'm going to go back to what I said on the radio, where when I filed my lawsuit, people started making a big deal out of that. Well, nobody made a big deal on the day that I said it, which I just said it right here. I said, this is exactly what I said. I said, I don't know if Donald Sterling is a racist or not. I don't know Donald Sterling, and I don't have any proof to say on the radio that he's either racist or not. I don't know the answer to that question. But I do think it's interesting that he's the only owner in the NBA that currently has a black general manager and a black head coach. That's all I said. And people then 5 years later wanted to make that into a racist comment. Well, the only way they did that was because they wanted to push their narrative.
The thing was, and like you said, he didn't actually say anything deliberately racist, like I hate, such and such, or I don't like these kind of people. It was more so his escort girlfriend,
right?
Whatever she was at the time, she would take pictures with these people at the games and stuff. And he's like, "Why are you posting pictures with these kind of people? Why are you associating with these kind of people?" Not necessarily like, "Oh, these people are this and that and the third." It was more so. I mean, you could tell that there was some sort of social construct that he grew up around. It doesn't necessarily mean that he...
Listen, I grew up in that same era, although Donald Sterling is in a different generation of me. I told this story, and I've shared this story, and it was on a 50,000-watt radio station. And I've shared this story many times. I grew up in the 60s, okay?
Oh, yeah.
And the N-word was prevalent in the 60s, but it wasn't prevalent in my house because my dad had a very, very simple rule about anything dealing with discrimination. It was not tolerated in the Napier household, and we knew that. And you could talk to my brother, and he would be able to relay the same stories. Chris Russo was over my house when we were 9 or 10 years old watching a baseball game. And when I used to go to Chris's house, his dad would use the N-word occasionally, and I would cringe even at that age because I knew it was so wrong. But you only know what you know. You don't know if that's what you are being brought up with in your environment. Now, we're talking about no cell phones, no internet, no social media, okay? So we're not talking about a world that, Jay, you live in today and that you grew up in. So I want to paint that picture. But we were watching a baseball game at my house with my dad. And Chris used the N-word. And my dad said, "Chris, come with me." And they were gone for 20 or 30 minutes. And I knew exactly what was going on. And Chris came back and we watched the end of the game. And fast forward to 1995. I have Chris on my radio show, big, huge radio icon in New York with Mike and the Mad Dog. And Chris comes on the show, and the first thing he says, "Man, how's your father? How's your dad?" And I go, "My dad's good." And he said, "Please tell your dad I said hello." And on the radio, now think about this. On the radio, Chris said, "Grant, I've never told you this." On the radio in 1995, he said to me, "You remember that day we were at your house watching a baseball game and I used a word I shouldn't have used?" I said, "I sure do." He said, "I never told you this. Your dad changed my life that day."
Incredible.
Now think about that. We're 9 or 10 years old. And my dad took Chris away from me in a quiet part of the house and educated Chris on why you don't use that word. Now think about the impact of education and think about the impact of learning from a different perspective, different from what you grew up in, not knowing in your household because you just think that that's life. That's what life is. You have no other way of learning until you get a different perspective. And to this day,
that's crazy.
To this day, I've heard so many phenomenal things about my dad. That's the greatest thing that anyone has ever said about my father. And I got off the radio that day and I called my father and I said, "Hey, I want to let you know this." And my dad actually broke down on the phone. And my dad said, "I remember that." And I said, "Well, think about the impact that you made on his life, that you changed his life that day." Right? Now, just so like I always talk about education, right? I always talk about how much I love traveling around the world and talking to different cultures, different people, different ethnicities, different religions, different backgrounds, because you get an appreciation that you don't have living in America necessarily about how people live, how people think. But here's what I'm going to go back in a roundabout way. You know what everybody wants that I talk to around all globes, all corners of the globe, and all ethnicities and all race? You know what people want?
Peace.
They want peace.
That's
right.
it. That's what you're going to say.
That's what that. Yes, they want peace.
Yeah.
They don't want war. They don't want hate. They want to feel safe, and they want peace. I've talked to people in Asia, Europe. I've talked to people all over the world. Fiji. I can go on and on. They want to be happy and they want peace. That's the one thing that has a commonality of all races: peace.
Pretty powerful stuff. Speaking of peace, great call tonight, Jay. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, I'm sorry I went off on a tangent, my friend.
No, I love being on the show, and I appreciate you guys for having me on.
Of course.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for the call.
Appreciate
Hey, partner, go get a drink of water. Clear that throat out.
Well, I can't do it. I got to talk about New Works Plumbing and Bennett's. You're going to talk about Bennett's. I'll talk about New Works. How's that for you? New Works Plumbing, they've got a fix for you. SackServicePlumbing.com or call the number on your screen. Again, New Works Plumbing, they are awesome. They're available 24/7 for all of your plumbing needs and repairs. Your turn, my friend.
We are also brought in part by Bennett's Side Grill, located in Rockland in the Blue Oaks Town Center. Go to Bennett'sRestaurants.com. You can check out their menus, their specials. They have an incredible happy hour, sips and tastes. Also, don't forget weekend brunch, 2 entrees, bottle of champagne, $44. That is Bennett'sRestaurants.com. You can find out more about Brian and the team and the wonderful food there. Huge thanks to Bennett's Westside Grill for sponsoring the show tonight.
Good job, buddy. I'll give you a 9.8 on that.
9.8. I'll take it. I will take that indeed. What do you think, Jason? Do you think a 9.8 was fair there? What do you give it?
I think that we're going to uphold the steak.
You got a bad connection,
Jason,
unfortunately.
And a bottle of wine special at Bennett's.
Sorry, Jason, we got a bad connection. Try to revamp that really quick. Condog will be coming to you in a second. But first, Dirk, welcome to the show tonight.
There we go. Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you?
Tonight. Grant, loved hearing about your father. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, if you could speak up a little bit, that would be great.
All right, I'm outside, so I can do that.
Okay.
So, yeah, I loved hearing the story about your father. Like, I have a great relationship with my father as well. And I always think about that when we talk about super athletes, right? Guys like LeBron James, for example. How well... You've had some criticism of James in the past. I think it's fair criticism, okay, of some things he said publicly. But imagine like how we might have turned out if we never had a father figure in our household to help us guide making decisions and what influences us. Absolutely. So I always try to extend a little bit of grace to these people that grow up in these environments, and they can make mistakes and have redemption, because they need that. Without that huge influence in their lives.
That's right. You only know what you know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And Grant, I had a question for you tonight. I wanted to know a little bit about the 80s, when it was it late 70s as well, when it was Magic Bird. And what was the race talk like in society at that time? Because I've heard this Caitlin Clark Angel Reese situation is analogous to what it was like Magic Bird, with racial undertones.
Okay.
In society. So I wanted to hear about it.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I don't have a great recollection of it, other than the fact that the NBA was a dying league. They had a drug scandal. The popularity of the NBA had really been suffering, and the league was in dire straits. And most people will tell you that Magic and Bird saved the league. I would say one thing about Larry Bird. He was huge at Indiana State, and he became a very popular figure. But I think when he went to Boston, the history of that city and the history of the Celtics, who had so many great legends who were white, like Bob Cousy, like John Havlicek, iconic figures in that organization, there was a lot of talk about Bird and his race, but not necessarily Bird in his race against Magic in his race. It was a rivalry, and the two great players coming from college that were now on the biggest rivals in the NBA, Boston and LA, with their history. It was a natural discussion of the rivalry between the Celtics and the Lakers that trumped anything to do with race because of the history of the Celtics organization and the history of the Lakers organization. So I might be better to have someone that is more credible on this topic. I was in college. I probably wasn't following it as closely as some others, but race was not a central figure in that rivalry. It was more of the Lakers and the Celtics and the great banners that they have and the great teams that they've had from yesteryear. And here we go again. It was more like that.
Gotcha. Thanks for sharing your opinion on that. You guys were discussing black quarterbacks earlier as well, and take race out of it. I think when you have a quarterback who is a supreme athlete in all aspects of their whole football career, they are faster, stronger, quicker throughout their whole career, and they go from that high school where they dominate, they go into college, and they are once again the superior athlete to everyone. The NFL becomes the great equalizer. So when you are a supreme athlete, and now you are competing with other supreme athletes, everything you've learned about the game sort of gets flipped on its head a bit, right? In contrast to somebody who has learned to excel in the position when they are not a supreme athlete. The game is more familiar at the NFL level, which I think, is what really how people assess this. If you want to assign a race to these supreme athletes, that's on you. But I think over time, we're going to see in the next 20 years, Grant, I think we're not going to think about that in terms of sports any longer. I really have always
I hope so.
Sports because
I hope so.
It seems to be a unifier and a great equalizer in terms of race, because the expressions "ball don't lie," that might have been used for one thing, but game respects game, and I love that about sports. It transcends race.
Thank you.
Way. But
and appreciate the call. We're going to let you go because we are having a little trouble hearing you. There's no, race is never an issue inside locker rooms. I've been in all kinds of different locker rooms. Like society needs to be like a sports locker room. If society was like a sports locker room, we'd have very few problems. Because go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't mean to step on. I was just going to say, in fact, I think it sometimes, or I can speak to San Diego State, it brought us closer together, and it wasn't the color of our skin. It was just our different cultures, because there's differences within the cultures and backgrounds, regardless, black, white, right? And so to the point, our leadership or the coaching staff would pick where we would have dinner if we went out to dinner. You know where Coach Fisher's favorite place to have dinner was at in LA?
Where's
that?
At
a soul food restaurant.
Yeah,
he'd get a big glass of milk. He'd have his yellow cake. He'd have chocolate frosting. And we learned so much and it was awesome. So I'm with you, Napes.
Mike Lamb was my broadcast partner for a couple of years on radio. I had Mike on my podcast, and Mike talked about growing up in Clovis, and he was very open. He said, when I went to USC, I didn't know anything. I grew up in a redneck community, and I only knew what I knew. And he said, I wasn't proud of some of the things that I was doing, but that's what I knew. That's how I was raised. I grew up in a community of that. He said, when I went to USC, he said, I learned more than at any period of my life because I was with Ronnie Lott and I was with Marcus Allen and I was with so many other Black players, and I learned about their background and their culture, and we became, bonded. And I was educated by force, is what he was saying, by circumstance, where I would have never, ever, ever received that type of education had I stayed in Clovis. And he said, so when I went to USC, I grew up and I became a man there because I learned that there wasn't just my culture in Clovis, that there was a whole nother world out there that I learned about. And to this day, some of those people that I'm referring to are his best friends in life. So he said it's an educational thing. Again, you only know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. So,
Amen.
yes. And I always encourage people, if you have the financial ability, go to college and go away to college, regardless of what kind of education you get, because the learning experience of being with people from different backgrounds and different cultures will be invaluable to your life. Much more valuable, in my opinion, or as valuable, I should say. I don't want to discredit the educational value of going to college, but it is, to me, as important, if not more important, than what you actually learn in the classroom.
Spot on, Grant. Absolutely spot on. Let's try to bring Jason back really quick. Got the line cleaned up. How you doing, Jason?
Doing well. I was a little bit parched earlier, and after hearing your comment to Grant about him maybe taking a little break, and I was just thinking in Bennett's when I went there, how awesome it was. They had that special, the bottle of wine or champagne, what it was, and the steak. It was a great place.
Monday
Love
night.
Bennett's.
65
That's right.
bucks, 2 entrees, bottle of wine, Bennett'sRestaurant.com.
There you go. I'm practicing the lead-in, Grant.
I love it.
Hey, if you don't mind, if I could just transition, I was just curious. And by the way, you're exactly right. Anybody that plays sports, the brotherhood of sports and working together to accomplish a goal, there's nothing like it. And I think that's why the institution of marriage is so great. If you find a good wife, that you're on the same path. In the same way with men in locker rooms, if you played any sports, that's the best part of sports, is you're working together towards a common goal, and you have to set aside your differences and focus on whatever your role is and doing that role great. So totally agree. I was wondering, Grant and Ryno, if with the Kings, we have a lot of role players, a lot of bench players. And I'd like to tie in the Stockton Kings into this. We had a player, can't remember his name right now, that came in from the G League. He was a two-way player. He got signed. It was just a gem. Did great. And I'm thinking in the past, like
Keon Ellis.
one of the things, Keon Ellis, And I'm thinking the Kings have done a really good job, I think, over the years, or at least the last couple years, bringing in players that kind of they're through the G League. Who, if you could identify which positions or which players right now that you might not think would really work towards what Mike Brown is trying to accomplish here with the players, like maybe some of the players in the G League that are coming in or that might be signed, like another Keon Ellis in the next couple of years, because I think those are, when you see teams like that are really great, is you can have trades with bigger players, but what about like kind of the underdog? Because it seems to me that Sacramento we as fans are always rooting for the underdog. I'm not sure.
Ryno, go ahead. What do you say to that?
Yeah. Thanks for the call, by the way,
My phone.
Jason. The connection's breaking out. I would say that you're right. The Kings in the last couple of years with the player development have done a really good job, both with the people drafted or the players drafted, and finding guys that went undrafted, putting them in positions instead of pulling the ball out there and trying to win, simulating looks that they may get, realistic looks in their role with the big team. There's some turnover right now. Jalen Slauson was a name we were really high on, at least in the G League with Stockton. He currently is not signed with the Kings. I would say all eyes right now are on Colby Jones and his development. He was the second-round draft pick last year. Mason Jones, we saw him a little bit last season. Great guy, enthusiastic, brings the energy. Mike Brown commented on him some, but it's going to be a new group in there, Grant, this season as they continue filling out the roster.
Yeah, my take is the Keon Ellises of the world are aberrations, and those stories are infrequent, although they do happen. I think the Kings have done a very good job of developing players. Their developmental system, I think, is good, and I give them good grades on that. But I think we have to be careful about expecting players on the Stockton Kings to step onto the floor at Golden One Center and really helping the Kings.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. The Keon Ellis is a world great story, and again, Keon Ellis is a perfect example of how important the G League is.
And what have you always told me behind the scenes? You have to be ready for your opportunity. And Keon Ellis was. If the Kings, if Malik Monk does not go down, he probably doesn't get that opportunity. But that's credit to the system that they're running. Those guys are ready, and that's the best thing I could say about it.
Great point.
So very good stuff. We will wrap up the calls tonight with Condog. You made it.
Yes, finally. No. But actually, I'm gonna double down. Ever since the Bighorns, Ryno Bighorns moved to Stockton Kings have been incredible with getting us guys, finding guys, and developing them for us to be, a successful funnel and development team for the Sacramento Kings. They've been very successful ever since that move. It's even closer to Sacramento than Ryno was, surprisingly.
Well, it's a good move for a variety of reasons. First of all, you don't have any weather issues, which was a problem in winter, when I-80 is not passable. So, for a variety of reasons, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. I mean, and it's right there next to, Ryan's favorite place, Nennis.
Bennett's is better, but Nennis is good.
Yep. You know what, Ryan? Maybe one of these days we got to do a Stockton Kings game in Nennis.
Yeah, for sure. To Grant's point, them being in Stockton does make it a lot easier. The Stockton team practices in Natomas, where the old practice center was. Acting GM Gabriel Harris has done a very, very good job of not just identifying talent, but also surrounding the young talent with some established guys that the NBA days are kind of out, but they can still teach a lot, like a Stanley Johnson, a Scal Labissiere, and such last season. So good stuff going on.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's good to have. You got to have that stuff, man. That's actually, that's how soccer does it. Soccer has those youth teams, those under 18, under 15 teams, and that's how they find, their Messis, their Wayne Rooneys, their Ronaldos, all that stuff.
No doubt. It's going to be a bigger part of the NBA. I don't know if both of you have noticed it, but you keep hearing player development. And with the new CBA, you've got to hit on your draft picks, and you got to get them developed in those first 4 years.
You have to. And plus, we got guys that are, skipping college to go to these G leagues and stuff. Yeah. So, they're not playing, with your Coach K's and, your Caliparis and your Jay Wrights and Roy Williams. They're not, they're not in those systems. So the NBA, you as a G League have to, step up and develop, because a lot of these guys got raw talent and stuff, but they also do need to make some money for their families. A lot of these guys come from very poor backgrounds, and just, even $100,000 from a G League contract is life-changing.
Well, the G League Ignite, they only won 2 games this last season.
And they had how many draft picks? Yeah.
In the lottery. Exactly right. There's something, maybe Grant, you can speak to this. There's something to be said about getting a year of semi-pro experience where you're shooting from the NBA 3-point line. You're going through the preparation versus.
I'm with you. I think that's a really good point. I think there is something to be said about that right now. Sea-Dog just saying to us that Sham Charania is saying that the Golden State Warriors are in serious talks and close to acquiring Buddy Hield.
Yeah, they've been filling out a lot of gaps. I know they signed Kyle Anderson earlier today.
Yeah,
they're filling out some. I heard they were in Lauri Markkanen in talks, but if they sign Buddy, I'm not sure if they have the cap for Markkanen, so they might be out of that sweepstakes.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and there's some new talks going around that Laurie's really looking forward to testing free agency. Remember, he only has a year left on his deal, so you got to take that into account as well.
Yep. Condog, good stuff, buddy.
All right, night, guys.
Appreciate you. I want to talk to you about Sunrise Landing, a residential community in Colusa from Blazona Development. Again, Sunrise Landing. And if you go to ColusaSunrise.com, you can check out all of their different models, 6 to choose from, no Mellorews, no homeowners. And it is right next to the Colusa Golf and Country Club. So check out these beautiful homes with various lot sizes. And all you need to do is go to ColusaSunrise.com. That is ColusaSunrise.com. You'll get all the information for Sunrise Landing. Once again, that is ColusaSunrise.com.
You know, I'm still working on those back-to-back reads. I'm gonna get you one of these next shows.
I'll do 3 in a row for you one time.
Okay.
And then I'll really put the pressure on you. How's that sound?
All right, fair enough. Let's raise the bar a little bit. I can't believe it's already been an hour and 10 minutes. What a fun show. A lot of ground.
Yeah, let's get one more call in here
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Prue, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hello.
Prue, welcome in. You there? All right, not going to work out, Apes. Well, Prue, give us a call next show. We're more than happy to talk some sports.
Let's do. You're going to do your show tomorrow too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so we'll have a triple header tomorrow. You good to go at 8:00?
Oh, you know it. All
right, so we'll do a triple header just like today because we have a lot going on and we want to make sure that we're on top of any breaking news. So Ryno will be on with his show at 2, the King's Court. I'll be on with my open forum Wednesday at 5:00, and then we'll be rejoined here at 8:00.
Sounds good. We'll send you into the 4th of July holiday with a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Hey, great show today. A lot of good calls. I enjoy this. And, we are fine to go off and talk about areas of importance, things that really matter in life. And I like talking about that sometimes and getting away from just the X's and O's. So I appreciate each and every one of you.